Okay, I'm just going to record you all real quick. Just my audience can get out of the way. All right. So, according to the World Economic Forum's 2012 Global Gender Gap Report, if an American woman wished to visit a nation where she had more equal rights than in the U.S., she'd have lots of options. South Africa, Nicaragua, Latvia, Cuba, Lesotho, and 18 other world nations would be among her choices. So, whenever a gender gap exists, when one gender participates more fully than another, inequity exists. And we have a gender gap in our country, and it's a problem. We have an equal rights amendment, a proposed equal rights amendment to our Constitution, which states that no state shall deny equal protection under the law based on sex. Unfortunately, the ERA was never ratified and never became part of the Constitution. But it should be part of the Constitution. It was passed in both houses of Congress, and 35 out of 38 necessary states ratified it. It's possible for it still to become ratified. There are two different ways for that to happen, which I'll explain. But first, people have to be informed. I think a lot of people don't know or have to be reminded that the ERA is not actually part of the Constitution. So, did you know that sex discrimination is not prohibited under the supreme law of our land? We need a concrete safeguard against sex discrimination. In her 2012 New York Times Upfront article, Monica Davey describes the history of the ERA, and I'll just give you a really brief overview. In 1923, Alice Paul proposed the idea at a convention for the National Women's Party in Washington, D.C., and a debate and vote on the Senate floor happened, but not until 1946, so a while later, which fell short of the two-thirds majority which was necessary. But thanks to the second wave of the feminist movement in the 1970s, a major shift in the debate occurred when the United Auto Workers Union started backing the proposal. So Martha Griffiths, Democratic representative from Michigan, reintroduced the bill, and it was passed through both houses and ratified by 35 states within 5 years. Unfortunately, missing 3 states that we need to get it to be part of the Constitution. So why do we need the ERA? We have the 14th Amendment, right? But the 14th Amendment relates to U.S. citizenship. It was added to the Constitution after the Civil War, stating that U.S.-born and naturalized citizens should enjoy equal protection under the law in 1868. But it wasn't really meant to refer to women, and it didn't succeed in eliminating discrimination whatsoever. In fact, women were not granted the right to vote until almost 60 years later, and that took a whole other amendment. And Jim Crow laws were allowed to flourish well into the 1960s. So the 14th Amendment didn't do much to eliminate discrimination. And today, many states have anti-discrimination laws which actively cover sex, race, disability, national origin, and sexual orientation. But a few defer to federal statutes, like Alabama. The Alabama law offices of Hicks, Matranga, and Hambright, for example, claim that Article 7 of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 prevents gender discrimination, but only in employment and only when there's a situation with 15 employees or more. So the 14th Amendment is not sufficient in creating an equitable society. And the Supreme Court even used it to overturn the Civil Rights Act of 1875, which would have given African Americans the right to use public transportation and public accommodations, but they used the Equal Protection Clause in the 14th Amendment to overturn that. Of course, the Supreme Court's interpretation has changed over the years, so with Brown versus the Board of Education and anti-sodomy laws, the 14th Amendment has been invoked to overturn those types of things. In 2012, the Washington Post reported an interview with Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia and asked whether or not he felt the 14th Amendment protected women's rights, and he blatantly answered no, it doesn't. So how can we get the ERA passed? two methods. The first one is the so-called Fresh Start method, where the bill is reintroduced, passed through both houses, and then ratified by 38 states. So basically starting over. Or the three-state method involves passing a joint resolution through both houses, which extends the ratification deadline, and then getting 3 more states to ratify the amendment. This year, May of this year, Senator Ben Cardin of Maryland introduced the resolution, and it's currently in the Senate Judiciary Committee. Of course, they have a lot to do, so is it realistic to think that we can get this done? I just point to same-sex marriage. If the tide of public opinion starts to change, then the political landscape does change. So I believe it's possible for it to become law. But our communities need to know about it. So in a Pew Research poll reported by the New York Times, it was reported that 98% of women and men believe in equal rights for the genders. But 40% of men and 25% of women think that we've already made most of the changes we need to make in order to achieve that. So in some areas, those people are right to be satisfied. According to the National Bureau of Economic Research, the gender gap in college education has completely closed in this country, and actually more women are graduating from college than men. So that's something to be proud of. But in terms of political representation at the political level, we have a lot of work to do. The U.S. ranks 55th in the world for political representation at the federal level. So 17% of our federal legislators are women, and we've never had a female head of state. So the Senate Judiciary Committee is charged with moving this ERA joint resolution forward, and it itself is comprised of 15 men and 3 women. And an interesting note is that on the committee's website, Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota is one of the 3 female members of the committee, and she's also the chairman is listed as the chairman of the subcommittee on antitrust, competition policy, and consumer issues. So chairman, not chairperson. So it's just interesting to note that this gender bias language is present in the official website of our Senate Judiciary Committee, and evidence of the gender inequality in our political landscape. So one possible way to get people interested or fired up, men, women, male, female, everyone involved in thinking about equity, is to talk about the ERA. Many people think it's already part of the Constitution. So we need to let people know in our communities that this passed through both houses of Congress but was never ratified. So it's hard to fight for something we think we already have. So it's important to talk to people about the ERA, to contact your senators. If you're wondering if your senator is a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee, I can let you know. Or a great website is govtrack.com to see how some of these bills are moving through. But wouldn't you like to live in a country where the supreme law of the land made it explicitly illegal to discriminate against women? Thanks.
Oh. Yay.